My name is Madison Clark. I'm 33 years old. I manage a luxury hotel in downtown Philadelphia. And 6 months ago, my older sister looked at my father in a hospital waiting room. While I was unconscious with tubes in my throat, my chest cracked open from emergency surgery, my heart barely holding together, and she said, "Let her die. We're not paying for it. Think about what that money could do for us." She didn't whisper it, she didn't cry, she didn't hesitate. She said it the way you cancel a reservation. Clear, practical, final. And my father, Robert Clark, the man who used to carry me on his shoulders when I was little, he nodded. They stood up. They walked out. They did not sign the surgical consent form. They did not look through the glass at me lying in that bed. They did not come back. I woke up 3 weeks later, alive. And when I found out what they had done, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't confront them. I did something much worse. But before I tell you what I did, you need to understand something. My family didn't suddenly become cruel that night. They were just consistent. I was born expensive. I was born with a hole in my heart. Ventricular septal defect. That's what the cardiologist called it. I don't remember the surgery. I was 2 years old, 9 hours on an operating table. A scar down my chest that looked too big for a child that small. What I do remember is the number. Not the medical term, not the recovery, the number, the bill. My father never forgot it. And he made sure I never forgot it either. I was 6 the first time he said it out loud. I'd asked for rain boots. Mine had a crack in the sole. Every time it rained, my socks filled with water. I stood in the kitchen doorway holding them up, hoping maybe this time he'd say yes. He was at the table with a stack of medical bills spread out in front of him. He didn't look up. He just said, "Do you know how much you cost this family, Madison?" 6 years old, holding wet socks, I didn't get the boots. By 10, I stopped asking for anything. No field trips, no new clothes. No birthday parties that required gifts, because every request came with that look, that calculation. Like I was a line item in a spreadsheet he regretted approving. Olivia never had to calculate. My sister Olivia is 4 years older than me. Blonde, confident, effortlessly charming. She never had to babysit to buy her own school supplies. She never had to fill out student loan paperwork alone. She got a car on her 18th birthday. I got bus schedules. She got tuition paid in full. I got repayment plans and interest rates that followed me for a decade. When she turned 25, my father co-signed a business loan so she could open her own real estate brokerage. He took her to lunch to celebrate, told her he was proud. When I turned 25, I'd just been promoted to assistant manager at the hotel. I called him to tell him. He listened for 15 seconds and said, "That's nice. Hope it pays enough to cover your loans." I wasn't angry. That's the part that still amazes me. I genuinely believed I owed them. I believed my existence had been a financial burden they heroically carried. That belief shaped everything. I overworked, overachieved, overgave. I never asked for help. Because somewhere deep in my chest, underneath the scar tissue, I thought, you already cost too much. The only person who never mentioned the cost, my grandfather, Harold Bennett, never once talked about money when it came to me. Not once. He lived in a 2-story wooden house outside Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, creaking floors, a porch swing that groaned louder when someone sat in it. He made scrambled eggs every Saturday morning when I visited. Slightly overcooked, slightly undersalted, the best meal I ate all week. He'd look at me across the kitchen table and say, "Tell me about your week, sweetheart." Not what did you achieve? Not are you paying your debt? Just tell me about your week. He watched, he saw everything. He noticed when Olivia got a new car. He noticed when I wore shoes that were starting to separate at the seams. He noticed when I flinched at conversations about money. He never confronted my father. That was his regret. I would learn that later. But he did something else, something quiet, strategic. He planned. The last thing he told me a month before he died, we were sitting on the porch swing. The sun was setting. The wood creaked rhythmically. He turned to me and said, "I've made sure you'll be okay, Maddie. When the time comes, find a man named Whitfield. He has everything you need." I smiled, squeezed his hand. Thought it was the medication talking. He was 81. His hands shook sometimes. I thought he was confused. I was wrong. Harold Bennett was sharper than anyone in my family, and he had been watching my father for years. The night of the funeral, after we buried him, I drove to his house alone. Sat on the porch swing in the dark. That's when I saw my father's truck pull into the gravel driveway. He didn't see my car parked down the street. He used a key I didn't know he had. Went straight into Harold's study. Through the window, I watched him open the green metal filing cabinet. He didn't move slowly, he moved with purpose. He pulled out a thick cream envelope, looked at it, slid it into his coat pocket, turned off the light, left. He didn't see me sitting in the dark, watching him take something from a dead man's house. I didn't know what was in that envelope yet, but I knew it mattered. The morning my heart stopped 4 weeks later, I collapsed in a conference room. Presentation mid-sentence, numbers on the screen blurring, pressure in my chest. Then the floor, then nothing, emergency surgery, $200,000 estimated cost. My father was listed as my emergency contact. He arrived at the hospital at 9:15 p.m. He didn't ask which room I was in. He didn't ask if I was conscious. He went straight to the financial counselor's window and asked, "How much is this going to cost?" When they told him I would die without surgery, he asked about payment plans. He asked about liability. He asked what would happen financially if he declined treatment. Then Olivia arrived. She listened, looked at the floor, looked at the ceiling, and said it. "Let her die." 12 feet away, a nurse heard everything. My father didn't argue, he nodded. They walked out. They left the unsigned consent form on the counter. They went home, believing I would be dead by morning. But I wasn't, because 3 years earlier when I got engaged, my fiancé Daniel insisted we complete healthcare proxies. I signed one naming him as my medical decision maker. I forgot about it. The nurse found it in the system, called Daniel. He was in Paris. He authorized the surgery over the phone. Flew 14 hours home, signed in person. Sat beside my bed for 3 weeks. My father never called to check if I survived. 4 days before I woke up, he called the hospital, not to ask about me, to ask when he could collect my personal belongings. He thought I was gone. When I opened my eyes and Daniel told me everything, I didn't cry, I didn't rage, I didn't call my father, because something had shifted inside me. For the first time in my life, the debt was gone. They had tried to erase me, and failed. And that changed the math. But here's what they didn't know: while I was unconscious in that hospital bed, my father wasn't grieving. He was stealing. And what he took would become the reason his entire world collapsed. When you almost die, something strange happens. People expect you to wake up softer, more grateful, more forgiving. But I woke up clearer. The first 48 hours after I regained consciousness were a blur of vitals, medication adjustments, and physical therapy evaluations. But beneath all of that, something was clicking into place. My father thought I was dead. That meant he had already made decisions, permanent ones, and men like Robert Clark don't sit still when there's money involved. They move, quietly, efficiently, and if he believed I wasn't coming back, he would have acted accordingly. I just didn't know how far he'd gone yet. The business card the night after my father visited with tulips and lemon bars, I asked Daniel for the card. The one my grandfather had given him. He didn't hesitate. He pulled his wallet from his back pocket and slid it across the hospital blanket. The edges were worn. Thomas Whitfield, attorney at law, that was it. No slogan. No dramatic tagline, just a name. Daniel had been carrying it for 2 years. Harold had given it to him on a Saturday afternoon while I was inside making coffee. "Keep this," my grandfather had told him. "You might need it someday. And when that day comes, let Maddie decide." Daniel never mentioned it, not once. He waited, because that's who he is. I dialed the number. It rang twice. Thomas Whitfield. His voice was calm, measured, the kind of voice that doesn't rush. "My name is Madison Clark," I said. "I think my grandfather—" "I've been trying to reach you for 5 months, Miss Clark." My grip tightened on the phone. 5 months? Yes, after your grandfather passed, his will was probated. I sent 3 certified letters to your address. All were returned unopened. I stared at Daniel. "I never saw them." "I suspected as much," Whitfield said. "I also attempted to call you. A man answered and informed me you had moved out of state and did not wish to be contacted. My father, he had intercepted my inheritance. He had blocked my lawyer, while I was visiting that house every Saturday thinking nothing was wrong. I've been in a coma for 3 weeks, I said quietly. There was a pause on the other end. I see, Whitfield replied, and his tone changed. What my grandfather really did. Whitfield arrived at the hospital the next afternoon. He walked into my room like a man who had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. He carried a leather briefcase and something else. Resolve. He sat down beside my bed. Daniel stood behind him. Whitfield opened the briefcase and placed 3 items on the hospital blanket: a thick legal folder, a sealed envelope with my name written in my grandfather's handwriting, a small black USB drive. "Your grandfather hired me 2 years ago," Whitfield said, "not to draft a simple will, to build a case. A case against my father." The room felt smaller. Whitfield opened the folder. Harold Bennett noticed financial discrepancies in his accounts. Over 5 years, more than $87,000 was withdrawn or redirected without his authorization. My throat tightened. "He documented everything?" Whitfield slid copies of bank statements across the blanket: forged checks, redirected pension deposits, transfers to an account under a P.O. box address. My father's P.O. box. "He suspected your father was covering significant losses," Whitfield continued. "Rather than confront him, he chose to secure his assets." Secure, strategic. Harold had never been confused. He had been preparing. "The Bryn Mawr property," Whitfield said calmly, "was transferred into your name 8 months before his death. The deed was filed and recorded with the county." I blinked. "In my name, yes. The house, the land, the garden, the porch swing. Mine's legally, irrevocably. My father had never owned it, not even for a second. He just didn't know that yet," Whitfield continued. "In addition, your grandfather created a trust account in your name. $120,000, restricted access until probate completed, which it did 5 months ago." My hands trembled. "My father thought the house was up for grabs. He thought he could claim it. He thought I was dead." Whitfield looked at me carefully. "Miss Clark, has your father made any moves regarding the property?" I met Daniel's eyes. "Yes," I said quietly. "He told me he was handling the paperwork." Whitfield's jaw tightened just slightly. "I was notified of a deed transfer filing 2 weeks ago." The room went silent. "What kind of filing?" "A transfer of ownership from Madison Marie Clark to Robert J. Clark." I stared at him. "I never signed anything." Whitfield nodded slowly. "I assumed as much." The forged power of attorney my father hadn't just stolen from Harold, he had escalated. Whitfield laid out the sequence like he was presenting evidence in court. "Your father filed a power of attorney document authorizing himself to act on your behalf in property matters. I never signed that. The signature appears to be practiced." Practiced. "He had rehearsed my handwriting," Whitfield continued. "It was notarized by a Victor Hale." The name hit something in my memory. Victor, my father's former business associate. The one involved in that commercial plaza project that had unexpected delays. The one that quietly collapsed 3 years ago. He used the forged power of attorney to transfer the property into his name. Then he applied for a home equity loan. How much? $350,000. The number didn't even feel real. Approved and funded within 6 business days. Daniel's hand found mine. "He mortgaged my grandfather's house?" "Yes." "And the money," Whitfield didn't hesitate, "disbursed to your father's personal account. From there, a large portion went toward debt settlement, construction liens, outstanding loans. The commercial plaza, it hadn't just failed. It had buried him." "And the rest?" I asked. Whitfield looked at me carefully. "A transfer of $110,000 was made to Olivia Clark, my sister." I closed my eyes. She knew, she had to know. You don't accept 6 figures without asking questions. And even if she didn't ask, she knew. Let her die. Think about what that money could do for us. It was never about medical bills. It was about liquidity. The part that broke something inside me. Whitfield slid the sealed envelope toward me. "Your grandfather asked that you read this personally." My fingers trembled as I opened it. The paper smelled faintly like his house. Like wood and old books and something warm. The handwriting was steady, not shaky, not confused, sharp. "Maddie, if you're reading this, it means 2 things. First, I'm gone. Second, your father has probably tried something. Don't make my mistake. I should have confronted him when I first saw the missing money. I told myself I was protecting the family. I was protecting his image. I was protecting peace. But peace built on silence is rot. You owe no one for surviving, not your father, not this family. If he has taken anything that belongs to you, I have left you everything you need to take it back. Do not be afraid of the truth. Love always, Grandpa." I didn't cry. Not then. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope because something had shifted again. This wasn't grief. This wasn't betrayal. This was clarity. My father didn't just try to let me die, he had planned to profit from it. The first move, Whitfield closed the folder. Miss Clark, we have grounds for criminal charges. Forgery, fraud, elder financial abuse, mortgage fraud. Identity theft, the list was long, very long. I recommend we file immediately, he said. I looked at Daniel. He didn't speak. He didn't pressure. He just waited. Let Maddie decide, Harold's voice echoed in my head. My father believed three things. I was weak. I was grateful. I would stay silent. He had built his entire strategy around those assumptions, and that was his fatal mistake. No, I said calmly. Whitfield blinked. No, not yet. Daniel's thumb pressed gently against my hand. Madison, he said quietly. I want to see how far he's willing to go, I replied, because this wasn't about rage, it wasn't about screaming in a courtroom. It was about exposure, complete, undeniable, irreversible. If we file now, I said, he'll scramble, he'll hide, he'll shift blame, he'll call it a misunderstanding. Whitfield studied me. You want him comfortable? Yes. I wanted him confident. I wanted him expanding Olivia's brokerage. I wanted him believing the house was secure. I wanted him sleeping well. Because when the ground finally shifted, I didn't want him bracing for it. I wanted him standing straight. Whitfield nodded slowly. Very well. He closed the briefcase. But Miss Clark, understand something? I do, and I did. This wasn't just legal, this was personal. My father had spent 33 years making me believe I was a burden, 3 weeks believing I was dead, and days profiting from it. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to threaten. I was going to let him build higher. So when it collapsed, it would bury everything he thought he protected. That night after Whitfield left, Daniel sat beside me in the dim hospital light. You're not angry, he said quietly. I stared at the ceiling. No, and that was the truth. Anger is loud. This was something else. This was calculation. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the debt, I was the leverage, and my father had no idea. When people think about revenge, they imagine something loud, explosive, immediate. A confrontation in a living room, a slammed glass of water, a scream that finally releases 30 years of swallowed resentment. That's not what I did. I sent my father a thank you text. 3 days after I got discharged from the hospital, I typed, "Thank you for coming to see me. It meant a lot." He responded in under a minute. Of course, family is everything. I stared at the message for a long time. Family is everything. The same man who asked what would happen financially if I died. The same man who forged my signature while I was unconscious. But here's the thing about liars. They relax when they believe you believe them, and I needed him relaxed. The visit 2 weeks later, I asked if I could come by the Bryn Mawr house. My house, I said casually over the phone. He didn't hesitate. Of course. I've been meaning to talk to you about some updates. Updates? I drove out there on a Sunday afternoon. The driveway looked different, fresh gravel. The lawn had been professionally trimmed. A coming soon real estate sign stood discreetly near the mailbox. Olivia's brokerage logo printed across the bottom. I parked slowly, took a breath, walked up the porch steps that still creaked the same way they always had. My father opened the door before I knocked. He smiled too wide. You look better, he said, scanning my chest as if he could see through the fabric to the scar beneath. Recovery suits me, I replied. We sat at the kitchen table. The same table where Harold made scrambled eggs, but the warmth was gone, replaced by paperwork. Folders, a laptop, spreadsheets open. I've been thinking, my father began, folding his hands together. This house is a lot of responsibility, taxes, maintenance. It doesn't make sense for you to carry that alone. Alone, he said it like he was helping. I've taken the liberty of refinancing, he continued, to consolidate some things. Increase liquidity, I nodded slowly. That's thoughtful. His eyes flickered. He wasn't expecting agreement. You were very sick, Madison. Someone had to step in like I was incapable. Like I was still 6 years old holding wet socks. And Olivia, I asked lightly, she's involved? He cleared his throat. She's expanding the brokerage. This property could be a flagship listing. There it was, the real plan, sell the house. Pay off debts, boost Olivia's business, rewrite history, and if I questioned it, he would say he was protecting me. I leaned back in the chair. That sounds ambitious. He smiled again, confident now, comfortable. You've always trusted me with financial matters, he said. That was almost impressive. The audacity. You're right, I said quietly, and I let him keep talking for 45 minutes. He explained projected profit margins, renovation estimates, market timing, interest rates. He had built a whole future using stolen ground, and the entire time I watched him, not angry, not emotional, just observing. Because when someone is constructing their own collapse, you don't interrupt. You let them finish the scaffolding. The recording, I wasn't reckless. Daniel had insisted on one precaution, a small digital recorder inside my purse. Legal in Pennsylvania, one-party consent state, meaning as long as I knew I was recording, it was admissible. My father didn't know, but he admitted everything, that he signed on my behalf, that he handled the paperwork, that he used the property to stabilize the family. He said it calmly, proudly, as if it proved leadership. I left that afternoon with a hug. A hug. He patted my back like he'd done me a favor. When I got into my car, I didn't cry. I pressed stop on the recorder, and I smiled, not because I enjoyed it, but because the trap was working. Olivia makes her move. 3 days later, Olivia called. She never called unless she needed something. Madison, she began, her voice syrup-sweet. I heard you came by the house. I did. Dad's just trying to help, she said quickly. You've been through a lot. I appreciate that, I replied. There was a pause, then she shifted. I actually wanted to talk to you about something else. Of course she did. We're launching a luxury subdivision project outside King of Prussia, high-end townhomes, great margins. She started explaining numbers, projected returns, investor slots, and then, I was hoping you'd consider investing, family rate of course. There it was, they needed capital. The home equity loan wasn't enough. My medical survival had complicated their timeline. How much? I asked calmly. 50,000 minimum. 50,000. The number felt almost poetic, because I now had access to $120,000 in a trust they didn't know existed. I'll think about it, I said. Don't take too long, she added. Opportunities like this don't wait. Neither does exposure. The background check that evening, Daniel and I sat at our dining table with Whitfield on speakerphone. I want everything, I said. Everything? Whitfield asked. Every failed project, every lien, every outstanding judgment, every associate. If we were going to dismantle this properly, I needed the full blueprint of the lie. Whitfield got quiet. I'll start with the commercial plaza collapse 3 years ago. The one my father called bad timing. It wasn't bad timing, it was misappropriated investor funds, unpaid contractors. A silent settlement that required him to liquidate most of his retirement savings, which is when the withdrawals from Harold's accounts began. He hadn't stolen out of greed, he'd stolen out of desperation. But desperation doesn't excuse betrayal, it just explains it. The power shift. 2 weeks later, I was back at work, walking through the marble lobby of the hotel, heels steady, posture straight. Colleagues whispering about my miraculous recovery. But what they didn't know was that something inside me had permanently recalibrated. For 33 years, I had operated from guilt. Now I operated from leverage. That changes everything. I approved budgets differently, negotiated contracts differently, spoke differently. Even my regional director noticed. You seem sharper, he said in a quarterly review. I smiled slightly. I had a near-death experience. That does something to a person. You stop apologizing for taking up space. The invitation. A month after my hospital discharge, Olivia sent a formal email. Subject line. Clark Development Group, Investor Preview Night. The event would be held at a private country club. Catered, press invited, local business leaders attending. She CC'd my father. The body of the email read, we would love for you to attend and show your support. Support, not partnership, not equality, support. I replied within minutes, wouldn't miss it. Daniel looked at me across the kitchen island. You're going? Yes, you're sure, I nodded. Because here's what they didn't know. Whitfield had filed a quiet injunction that morning, not public yet, but pending. A freeze request on the Bryn Mawr property based on suspected fraud. The bank had been notified, they just hadn't acted. Yet timing matters, and Investor Preview Night felt like perfect timing. The calm before the day of the event, I stood in front of my mirror longer than usual. Not because I was nervous, but because I was choosing armor. I wore black. Simple, structured, clean lines, no dramatic jewelry, no statement pieces, just presence. Daniel adjusted his cufflinks beside me. You don't have to do this publicly, he said softly. I know, but you're going to? Yes. Because this wasn't about humiliation, it was about correction. My father built his authority on the assumption that I would stay small, that I would stay quiet, that I would stay grateful. He miscalculated, and tonight, he was about to understand how badly. As we pulled into the country club parking lot, I saw my father's car near the entrance. Valet attendants moving quickly. Guests in tailored suits and polished heels. Laughter drifting through the open doors. Inside, Olivia would be glowing. My father would be networking, confident, expanding, comfortable, believing the foundation was solid. He didn't know the bank had flagged the mortgage. He didn't know the deed transfer was under review. He didn't know the notary license of Victor Hale had been suspended last year. He didn't know Whitfield had copies of everything. He didn't know the ground had already started shifting. And as I stepped out of the car, I realized something surprising. I didn't hate him. Hate is emotional. This was structural. He had built a lie. I was simply removing its support beams. And once I walked through those doors, the first beam would fall. The country club smelled like polished wood and expensive cologne. Crystal chandeliers reflected off marble floors. Soft jazz floated through the room, and at the center of it all stood my sister. Olivia Clark, white tailored suit, perfect posture, a glass of champagne in one hand, a future she believed was finally secured. My father stood 2 feet behind her, laughing with a man in a navy blazer. His hand rested on Olivia's shoulder like a silent signature. Ownership, pride, control. For a moment, I just watched them. Because this is the part people misunderstand about revenge. The most powerful moment isn't when you strike. It's when you realize you don't feel small anymore. I didn't feel like the sick child. I didn't feel like the financial burden. I didn't feel like the afterthought. I felt steady. And that scared me more than anger ever could. The welcome speech. We were about 20 minutes into networking when Olivia clinked her glass. The room quieted. She stepped onto the small stage near the presentation screen. Thank you all for coming tonight, she began smoothly. Clark Development Group is proud to unveil our most ambitious project yet. Slides flashed behind her. Renderings of modern townhomes, projected ROI percentages, projected completion dates. My father scanned the room like a general reviewing troops, and then Olivia smiled wider. I'd also like to thank my father, Robert Clark, whose guidance and support have made this possible. Applause. He gave a modest nod, and that's when it happened. The doors at the back of the room opened again, not dramatically, not loudly. But noticeably, 2 men in suits walked in. One carried a leather portfolio. The other wore the quiet expression of someone who does not attend investor nights for networking. I recognized one of them immediately. Thomas Whitfield. He made eye contact with me, small nod, no smile, just confirmation it was time. The interruption. Olivia continued. We've already secured the property and leveraged additional equity to ensure rapid development. Excuse me. Whitfield's voice wasn't loud. But it carried. The room turned. My father's smile faded a fraction. Olivia blinked. Yes, she said, forcing composure. Whitfield stepped forward. Thomas Whitfield, counsel for Madison Clark. There it was, my name out loud. In a room full of investors. A ripple of confusion moved through the crowd. My father's eyes found mine, sharp, calculating. Whitfield continued calmly. I apologize for the interruption, but there appears to be a material misrepresentation regarding the equity referenced in this presentation. The room stilled. Olivia laughed lightly. I'm sorry, I think you're mistaken. I assure you, Whitfield replied evenly, I am not. He opened the portfolio, removed a document. This is a court-filed injunction freezing the property located in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, previously presented as collateral. Silence. Not dramatic silence. Heavy silence. The kind that makes investors instinctively step back. My father stepped forward quickly. This is inappropriate, he said sharply. This is a private family matter. Whitfield didn't look at him. It became a legal matter when forged documentation was filed with the county recorder's office. There it was, forged. The word didn't echo, it dropped, hard. The first crack. Olivia's composure shifted. Forged, she repeated, eyes darting to my father. Whitfield turned slightly toward the room. The deed transfer used to secure the home equity loan was executed under a falsified power of attorney. Additionally, the notary listed on the document, Victor Hale, no longer holds an active commission. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Phones came out. Investors glanced at one another. The man in the navy blazer quietly stepped away from my father. Robert Clark's jaw tightened. "This is harassment," he snapped. "Madison, say something." All eyes turned to me. This was the moment. The cinematic version would have me storm the stage. Yell, cry, expose every detail, but power isn't loud, it's controlled. I stepped forward slowly. Calm, measured. "I was in a coma," I said evenly. "When my signature was filed, that was it. No theatrics, no raised voice, just a fact." Olivia looked at my father, really looked at him, for the first time that night. "Dad," she asked quietly. He didn't answer her, he looked at me. And for the first time in my life, he didn't look superior. He looked cornered. The investors retreat. The country club manager approached nervously. "Is there an issue we need to address?" Whitfield handed him a copy of the injunction. "Simply ensuring all parties are aware of pending litigation before financial commitments are made." Translation, run, and they did, not dramatically, but efficiently. Business cards slipped back into pockets. Polite excuses were made. Within 5 minutes, the room had thinned by half. Within 10, it was nearly empty. Olivia stepped down from the stage slowly, her face pale. "You told me everything was handled," she said to my father. "It is," he insisted. "This is just a misunderstanding." Whitfield tilted his head slightly. "The bank has been notified. The loan is under review. Fraud investigations tend to escalate quickly once lenders are involved." Escalate. Another quiet word with sharp edges. "The private collapse eventually. It was just the four of us. Me, Daniel, Olivia, my father, and Whitfield standing slightly back." Olivia's voice trembled now. "You used her signature?" My father's mask cracked. "It was temporary," he snapped. "She was sick. I was protecting assets." "By stealing them?" I asked calmly. He flinched, not from anger, from exposure. "I built this family," he shouted suddenly. "I carried the financial burden for years." There it was, the narrative, the martyr. I tilted my head slightly. "No," I said softly. "Grandpa carried it." The silence after that was different. Because it wasn't shock, it was recognition. Olivia looked between us. "Is this true?" she whispered. My father didn't answer, and that was answer enough. The final move. Whitfield stepped forward one last time. "Mr. Clark, formal charges have not yet been filed. My client is offering you an opportunity." My father's eyes snapped toward him. "Opportunity?" "Yes, immediate reversal of the deed transfer. Full repayment of misappropriated funds, written admission of unauthorized filings. In exchange, criminal complaints will be reconsidered." Olivia stared at me. "You're giving him a way out." I met her gaze. "I'm giving him a choice." Because this was never about destroying him. It was about correction, restoration, truth. He had tried to let me die to protect his image. Now his image was the only thing I was offering to protect. If he cooperated, my father's hands trembled slightly. "Madison, this will ruin me." I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time without fear. "You tried to let me die." The words were quiet, but they didn't shake. "You already ruined yourself." The walkout. We left before he answered, because the decision wasn't mine anymore. It was his. As Daniel and I stepped outside into the cool night air, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not triumph. Not satisfaction. Relief. 33 years of quiet guilt. Gone. I didn't owe him survival. I didn't owe him silence. I didn't owe him protection. He had mistaken my kindness for weakness. He had mistaken my gratitude for obligation. And tonight, he understood the difference. Behind us, through the glass doors, I saw Olivia standing alone, my father pacing, his empire reduced to paperwork and panic. And the most surprising part, I didn't feel powerful because he was falling. I felt powerful because I wasn't afraid anymore. But here's what no one tells you about collapse. It doesn't happen all at once. It unfolds. And what happened next was something I hadn't predicted. Not from him, from Olivia. The call came 3 days later, not from my father, from Olivia. I let it ring once, twice. On the third ring, I answered. Her voice didn't sound polished anymore. It sounded tired. "What did he really do?" she asked. No greeting, no accusation, just that. I leaned back against the kitchen counter. Daniel was across the room, pretending not to listen. "He forged a power of attorney," I said evenly. "Transferred the deed Took out a $350,000 loan, paid off business debts, sent you $110,000. Silence. Then I didn't know, she whispered. I believed her, not because she deserved the benefit of the doubt, but because Olivia had always lived in a curated reality. Dad handles it. Dad fixes it. Dad knows best. She never looked under the surface, she just benefited from it. I thought it was profit from a private investor, she continued. He said the Bryn Mawr house had always been intended for development. It was intended for me, I replied calmly. Another long silence, then she said something I didn't expect. He asked if you'd press charges. That caught my attention. And what did you say? I asked him if he forged your name. I closed my eyes briefly. And he didn't answer. That was answer enough. The choice that afternoon my father called, I almost didn't answer. But closure doesn't come from avoidance, it comes from confrontation without fear. Madison, he said, voice tight. I need to speak with you. I'm listening. I'll reverse the transfer, he said quickly. I'll cooperate, but the loan, the money's already allocated. I don't have that kind of liquidity. Liquidity. Even now, he spoke in numbers. You took it, I said. You solve it. I was protecting this family, he snapped. The old script, the martyr, the burden bearer, but it didn't land anymore. You were protecting your pride, I replied. Silence. He shifted tactics. You don't understand what it's like to carry financial responsibility for everyone. And that's when I felt it. Not anger, clarity. You made me feel like I was a debt, I said quietly, for surviving. He inhaled sharply. I never said that. You didn't have to. 33 years of implication is louder than one sentence. I was 6 years old asking for rain boots, I continued. You asked me if I knew how much I cost. He didn't speak. Because he remembered. You don't get to rewrite that now. The legal unraveling within a week, the deed transfer was reversed. Public record corrected, the mortgage flagged as fraudulent. The bank launched a formal investigation. Victor Hale, the notary, was subpoenaed. He folded quickly, admitted the document was signed outside proper procedure, admitted my father had handled the details. The commercial plaza investors resurfaced once they smelled blood. Old contractors filed renewed complaints. What had been buried under quiet settlements began rising. Whitfield called it cascading exposure. One lie, once revealed, weakens the structure of every other lie. My father hired an attorney. Tried to negotiate, tried to frame it as family misunderstanding. But paper trails don't misunderstand. They document. Olivia's decision 2 weeks into the investigation, Olivia showed up at my door, no makeup. No designer handbag, just her. She looked smaller, not physically, but structurally. I returned the money, she said. I blinked. You what? I wired the $110,000 back to the bank handling the loan review. I'm not keeping it. That surprised me. Why? I asked honestly. Her eyes were red. Because I don't want to build my life on something stolen. For the first time, I saw her outside of Dad's shadow, outside of curated success. Just a woman realizing the foundation wasn't real. I should have asked more questions, she admitted. I just trusted him. Trust without verification, that's how manipulation survives. I'm not asking you to forgive him, she continued. Or me. I know, I said, and I don't expect things to go back to normal. They won't, I replied gently, because some breaks don't mend, they redefine. The offer a month later, Whitfield called with an update. Criminal charges are likely, he said calmly. The bank wants an example. An example, my father was no longer a patriarch. He was a case file. There's still an option to influence prosecutorial discretion, Whitfield added. If you wish. Meaning I could push harder or ease. Daniel watched me carefully as I considered it. For years I imagined confronting my father. Demanding apology, demanding acknowledgement, demanding he admit I wasn't a burden. But here's what I realized. If someone needs a courtroom to understand their failure, they already lost. I don't want prison, I said finally. Whitfield paused. You're certain? Yes. Then we negotiate restitution and a formal admission, public record, no jail time if he complies. That felt right, not mercy, accountability. The admission, the letter arrived certified. 4 pages, legal language, precise. Robert J. Clark acknowledged unauthorized execution of a power of attorney, improper transfer of property, financial misrepresentation in loan acquisition. It was signed, not forged, signed. I read it twice, then I folded it carefully, placed it in a drawer not as a trophy, but as closure. The house 3 months later, I stood on the porch of the Bryn Mawr house again. The gravel driveway was gone, the real estate sign removed. The air smelled like early autumn. Daniel stepped beside me. "It's quiet," he said. "It always was," I replied. We walked inside. The floors still creaked. The kitchen still held echoes, but it felt different now, not heavy. Not complicated, just mine. I renovated slowly, kept the porch swing, repainted the study, turned the upstairs bedroom into a reading room, and on the wall above the desk I framed my grandfather's letter, not as revenge, as reminder. The last conversation I saw my father once more, at a mediation office. He looked older, smaller, the confidence gone. "I never meant for it to go that far," he said quietly. I believed that. Intent doesn't erase impact. But I believed he hadn't planned to be exposed. He thought I would stay quiet. "I spent my whole life trying to recover from one failed investment," he admitted. "I thought if I could just stabilize things." "You stole from your father," I said calmly. His eyes dropped. "And you tried to let me die." He flinched again. That one would always land. "I panicked," he whispered. There it was, not greed, not evil panic, but panic without integrity is still betrayal. "I hope you figure out who you are without debt chasing you," I said finally. He looked confused. "You're not my debt anymore." And that was the last thing I said to him. The real power shift. People think revenge is about destruction. It's not, it's about correction. For 33 years, I lived like I owed someone for surviving, like my scar was an invoice, like my existence required repayment. But here's what almost dying teaches you. You don't owe anyone for breathing. You don't owe anyone for being saved. You don't owe anyone for costing money when you were a child who needed surgery. The debt was never mine. It was his guilt, his pride, his fear of failure. And when he tried to let me die to protect that illusion, he showed me exactly who he was. I didn't destroy his empire. He built it on a lie. I just removed the silence that was holding it up. Today, the Bryn Mawr house is mine. The trust my grandfather left, invested wisely. The hotel promoted me to regional director last quarter, not because of pity, because I negotiate differently now. I don't shrink. I don't apologize. And I never confuse love with financial obligation again. Olivia and I speak occasionally, carefully, honestly. We're not what we were, but we're not pretending anymore either. As for my father, he lives in a smaller house now. Drives a used car, works as a financial consultant for small contractors. Irony has a sense of humor, but I don't hate him. Hate would mean he still occupies space in me. He doesn't. The scar on my chest is still there. A thin white line, but when I look at it now, I don't see cost, I see survival. And survival is never a debt.